for being here, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, and it's great to have you here, Craig. I live here in Evanston, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Bookends and how they are killing the game at book events. It's awesome to see because most of the time when authors come through Chicago, they're in Naperville, and that's really far away. So it's nice. It's nice to have authors here, and it's nice to have you here, Craig. And to get here, I walked
Nice.
because that felt thematically appropriate, and also because we only have one car and my wife was gone. And I was texting with you, and I was texting with my wife, who was coordinating with our son, and I realized I was doing it all wrong, right? Like, I was walking wrong. I was, like, looking down and on my phone the whole time. And this book is so interesting because it's such an offline story. And walking is such a kind of offline way of being. And you're telling this story, and this book came out at a time where tech which has already dominated our lives for so long, is trying new and fun, inventive ways of wending its way even further into our lives. I'm curious about what made you decide that kind of now was the time to tell this story in this way.
Mainly, Random House gave me a contract. That was the big. But first of all, thank you all for coming out. This is cool to see everyone. I don't know where I am. I don't know what day it is. I just put coordinates into a thing and go to places. This is so cool to see, and thank you, Dan, for making the time and helping us figure out where to do this. You know, Dan was helping us brainstorm places to go to and places to do these events. So in terms of why now, I mean, it was really just, I think there was no real planning, but I think there's probably also no coincidence that my interest in walking and my kind of commitment to it, and then also doing it with my rules, because I have these walking rules. So when I'm doing walks, I have a few things. One is no social media, no news. I'm not allowed to read news sites. Basically not allowed to do anything fun online, so it's all kind of blocked. And then also no podcasts, no music. So you're really trying to get to this place of, I say boredom. People kind of go, why do you say boredom? But really, I think one thing we've lost in the last few years, especially the last couple of years, is any sense of boredom. You have half a millisecond of downtime, and you just reflexively reaching for the phone. And one of the things I've been noticing on this U.S. tour, I'm having all sorts of like double reverse culture shock and just freaking out, seeing the state of contemporary America in a lot of ways. And one thing in Japan that I'm always mesmerized by is how service workers, and especially at the end of a movie. So a movie ends in Tokyo, right? You go to see a movie at the movie theater. A couple things happen. One, the lights do not come on when the movie's done. The credits start rolling, and you just sit there, and everyone just sits there. No one gets up, and no one looks at their phone. Everyone just stares at the movie screen and watches the credits, and they probably can't even read them, because a lot of times they're in English or whatever. And it's like this moment of kind of reverence or whatever, respect for the thing. And then when it's done, everyone gets up. And so, I keep watching. This is like my little like barometer of like, is Japan doomed or not? Is if I go to the movies and if I see people getting up at the end of it or picking up their phones, not being able to, sort of hold back from the dopamine hit that's waiting for them in the pocket. So anyway, but traveling America and just seeing how everyone, everywhere, any millisecond of downtime they have, people in hotels, people in shops or whatever, like everyone's got the phone, they're just noses in the phone all the time. Like to a degree that you sort of don't see in Japan. You see it differently in Japan, but you don't see it in this way. And so anyway, I think you just feel this, right? Everyone kind of feels this pervasively. And so for the last 6 or 7 years, I've kind of started doing more and more of these intense walks with all these rules. And what does it mean to really be bored? And what does your mind do when you're bored? And how do you have to create artificial boredom? And so that, it was exactly 4 years ago to this day that I was doing the walk that became this book. And that was a walk during peak COVID. We didn't know what was happening in Japan. The borders had been closed by this point for about a year. We didn't know when they were going to open. The cases were really low. It was like 12 cases in all of Japan. And yet everyone was being super careful. And the area that I was walking in, Mie and Wakayama prefectures, it was like 3 cases or 4 cases. And yet everyone was like really like, I'm doing this walk, no one is out, no one's staying in the hotels. I have kind of the road to myself, the hotels to myself. And so it was this weird, I think, kind of reflective moment for me, extra reflective because of the silence, because of how you couldn't go anywhere in the world. Like I couldn't leave Japan because they wouldn't let me back in, so I was kind of stuck. But it all felt really good. Like it's actually, for me, kind of a relief when everything shut down in a strange way. I was lucky I was able to keep working. And actually I was able to start doing all the work that's kind of led to what I'm doing today. That the downtime, the closing of everything kind of catalyzed that. But I also just realized I'd been moving too quickly. My life was just too full of stuff. And so anyway, this walk was one of the walks I was doing during that period. And there was just kind of a silence to it all that felt special. And I think that's why this walk has turned into this book. And I have several other walks that have not turned into books to this degree, although they're on the docket to potentially turn into books. Mm-hmm. But I think it was that combination of the silence of kind of COVID, the world sort of slowing down a couple notches. And then also I've been building up for a decade kind of this muscle to go offline. So it wasn't a big ask internally for me to say, okay, turn this stuff off and just be present. And just photograph people every day and talk to the people on the road that I did meet, the farmers that were working their fields and stuff like that. And then at the end of the day, spend 4 or 5 hours collating. So I'd do 20, 30, 40 kilometers of walking. And one of my other rules was take a portrait of someone before 10 a.m. And so it'd be like 9:50. And I'd be like, oh shit, I haven't taken a photo of someone. And I just, whoever's nearby, hey, farmer in the field, like, hey, can I take your picture? And everyone was, even though it was COVID times, everyone was pretty relaxed about that stuff. And so I'd go into the tatami mat shop, And it was the sort of thing that I think when you're habitually or pathologically online, you forget about these sort of interactions and delights that are just waiting for you every day, all throughout the day, of amazing people you could be connecting with. And the point of the Portrait by 10 a.m. is to have one exciting, meaningful connection to catalyze all the other creativity for the rest of the day. And it really does, it infuses me personally. I mean, I get high off of having a connection with a stranger and having a mutually kind of positive interaction. They're excited, I'm excited, and you have a little piece of art or culture or whatever that comes out of it. It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an interesting point. This is also a very funny, it's like we're having a conversation on the bus. We're both facing forward, kind of turning toward each other. The book has this kind of solitariness to it, right? And the practice of the walk has a solitariness to it. And yet, it's also really alive with all of the people that you meet along the way. And I'm curious about kind of, and I think you've hinted at least with the portrait thing, but how you sort of shift gears from deep in your head or deep in silence to suddenly coming upon someone and engaging with them. Like, how do you shift that gear? How do you begin that process?
Yeah, the thing is like, even if I talk to 10 people every day, there's still 8 hours and 20 minutes of talking to nobody. So it's like mostly blank space. And then another one of my rules is I just have to say hello to everyone enthusiastically. So it's just about having these stupid rules that, when I'm back home, if I'm in Tokyo or Kamakura or whatever, you just don't do these things because, I don't know, why don't we do these things? I guess it's overwhelming. If you said hello to everyone in the city, that's kind of exhausting. And so when you're out on the road, you can kind of create these alternative personalities. And what I found is just by doing that, the performance of being someone else or being a better version of the self, which I find therapy is essentially that. It's like every week for an hour, I'm going to try to be the best version of myself, the most honest version of myself with myself. And then it turns out that if you keep doing that week after week after week, it starts to bleed into the rest of your life. And so the walks, a big part of it is just creating this archetype of what the fullness of a single day could feel like. And whether or not you're able to bring that back 100% to your day-to-day is sort of secondary to the fact that you've experienced it. At the end of the day on these walks, I get in bed and it's just total exhaustion. Because it's, 20, 30, 40K, photographing people, hearing stories. And then when I'm not talking to people, a big part of it is transcribing. Like my mind just immediately goes to writing, to prose. So it's just writing. When you take away all the other distractions, it's writing. So I'm sort of transcribing stuff into my AirPods or whatever. And then I get to the inn and it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I'll spend the next 4 or 5 hours taking those transcriptions, using those as jumping points for essays, for pop-up newsletters, things like that. And so then you do have this, so during the day you're using your body, you're kind of whittling your body all the way down to nothing. And then you have 4 or 5 hours at night where you're, for me, to sort of do a photo edit rev, processing of photos, plus several hours of writing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words. That really wrings my brain down to nothing. So when I get in bed at night, it just feels like I've had the most full day possible. It's incredible. And you do that, the really critical thing is doing it day after day after day after day, as opposed to doing it just like 1 or 2 days in a row. So, I've walked Tokaido 3 times, or Tokaido twice, Nakasendo once, I've walked the Key Peninsula a bunch. And you'll meet other people that are kind of doing these walks. So these are, the Tokaido and Nakasendo are walks between Tokyo and Kyoto. And it takes, if you take your time and you're not crazy about it, it's about 4 weeks to do the whole walk. But you'll see old kind of retired couples, and they're doing it weekend by weekend. So they'll come out for the weekend and do these 2 days, and then they go home, and then they come back and they do the next 2 days. And that's great. But in the same way that like Vipassana, doing silent meditation, you need the 10 days because it takes 3 days for you to arrive at the retreat mentally. And then you have like a couple of days of acclimation. And then finally on day 5, 6, 7, you get the benefit. You start to experience truly like why you're at this retreat, why you're doing the 10 hours of meditation a day. And then day 8 comes and you start thinking about, oh, I'm going to leave in a day or 2. And then day 9 comes and all you can think about is the next day when you're going to be released. And you've made it. Oh my God, I've made it. And so you're sort of not there anymore. And so the same thing with these walks. And you can do them weekend by weekend by weekend, but you're missing out, for me, on what the real potency is, which is the repetition, and the repetition over weeks. And that's where to me, the main value comes from.
So I want to touch on something you just mentioned because I feel like my mental model of this whole book just changed, which is, in my mental model of the book, you are sort of walking quietly and contemplatively for hours on end, but you are actually talking out loud to yourself and recording. So, yes. So you're the dude walking through the forest in the shadow of COVID where no one else is around and somebody's, half a kilometer ahead of you and they're like, what the fuck is coming? Yeah. Right? Like, okay, got it.
Yeah. No, it's very active. So, I mean, the offlininess, I am offline in the sense that I'm actively choosing not to go online.
Yeah.
But someone asked me the other day, they're like, isn't there some sort of competition between wanting to transcribe things, but also being hyper present, being really, just being really in the moment. And for me, the transcription, the thinking, the photographing, the talk, that all makes me more in the moment, actually, because it makes me more observant and it makes me more sensitive to these really beautiful, weird things someone might say. It's like there's a passage in the book about, staying with this old couple. Hold on, let me find it. It's page 60, I think. Yeah, so this old couple, it's like, they ask me if I want a Western or Japanese breakfast. Most inns don't offer a choice. Most are Japanese style only. So when I get the chance, I go Western, if only to shake things up. Big mistake. She bakes me 5 loaves of bread. Can't believe I don't eat them all. The husband keeps gesturing for me to rip them apart and shove them down my gullet. They stand and watch as I carbo load. They're unusually touchy, squeeze my arms, check my body mass index. They use a translucent garbage bag to wrap up most of the bread. I tie it to my pack like a hobo. And while that's happening, I'm just so hyper aware of it because I'm like, I gotta write this down. This is really funny, this is really weird. So I find having a purpose at the end of the day of writing the essays, sending the pop-up newsletters, and then ultimately maybe having it become a book, it's like, my attention across the whetstone. I just feel so much more, willing to actively be present as opposed to be passively present. And to me, that's where kind of all the fun and value of the walks lies. And I sometimes in writing, I'll say this is like an ascetic practice, but it really does feel like that. Yeah. Like it's not meant to be, oh, let's go on a comfortable walk and have a good time and just, take it easy. It's meant to be, let's go and really look at the world. Let's really be present. Let's really, observe and try to capture it because you also forget so quickly. That's one of the things you learn if you do design field work research or whatever. It's like when you're in the field and you're observing people and you're doing things, you have to write that down immediately. If you wait 2 days, you've forgotten half of it. So that's kind of where that rhythm of, at night I get to the inn and then it's just like, let's get to work. That's when the work starts. And people sometimes go, well, what if you meet someone cool and like you want to hang out? And it's like, I live in Japan. I'll just call them after. Like after the walk, I'll be like, hey, can I come back over? And then we can hang out then.
That passage that you just read, that's actually one of my favorite parts in the book. You end up having this young woman comes in and you're introduced to her as their daughter, and you kind of crack wise with her about how much bread they're making you eat and that kind of thing. And then later she leaves and the elderly man kind of says, she's not my daughter. She's somebody that came and never really left, and they sort of adopted her, and for lack of a better term. And that's actually where the title of the book comes from. It ends with sort of things become other things. And it's a really beautiful passage because there's a melancholy to it, right? And a sweetness to it that I feel like is actually very evocative through the whole book, right? In my many notes that I've written as I've read, I was like, this is a sad book about walking, right? And it is. There's a sadness to it. There is a level of grief in the book, and it's interesting because to me it's written in 2021, right? While at that point in America we were like doing beer bongs together and stuff, but like in Japan they were still taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And
we didn't have the vaccine still.
Yeah.
Which was just in terms of timeline through it. Think about that.
But death is also sort of a main character in the book, and that the book is very much sort of a conversation that you're having with Brian, which is a childhood friend of yours who was murdered.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is, again, kind of coming into this theme of tech and analog, but the life we lead right now is so much about sort of the denial of grief, right? And the denial of the idea that there is death here, right? And yet there's so much of that within the book, whether it's the direct address to your childhood friend or, walking in these ancient cemeteries and all of that. And I'm just kind of curious about how you manage to balance all of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think Japan is very at peace with grief. That's a big part of it. Living in Japan, there's kind of almost like a fatalistic sense of, I mean, obviously there's all the wabi-sabi stuff and mono no aware and like, oh, things are going to disappear and cherry blossoms are beautiful and death and let's kill ourselves under the cherry tree and all this stuff. And so there's all of that kind of that you're sort of constantly butting up against. But, just in general, when you live in a place that's so sort of geographically tenuous with the earthquakes and everything, the tsunamis, you're just kind of at peace with it. The fact that, at any moment, a big, terrible thing could come and literally wash away the village. And so I think maybe that's partially influenced, maybe the tone of the book a little bit. But then also, obviously, during COVID and the quietude of it, but then also the peninsula itself is so silent and it's depopulating. And it itself is disappearing. I mean, that's the real trigger that I started thinking about Brian again, is I'm walking through a place that's socioeconomically post-industrial, so it's logging and fishing, and other kind of, there's some mining and stuff that was happening on the peninsula, and that's all gone. And yet there's a kind of grace to their winding down of all that post-industrial sort of sense of things. And there isn't the violence, there isn't the drugs. And so the place I grew up in, which interestingly, Ocean Vuong's new book takes place in my hometown. So East Gladness is where I grew up, even though it's not called East Gladness. I mean, it's just it's barely, I don't know why he doesn't just say he's writing memoirs. It's very bizarre. But he essentially it's effectively a memoir, a little case study of the town. And so you can see, I think that book takes place in 2009. I'm reflecting back on basically mid-80s to early 90s. But it's impossible for me to walk the peninsula, see that kind of socioeconomic parallel, and yet not feel any of the violence or the systemic failures that Brian and I grew up with. And so that's really what started triggering things, was seeing the kids on the peninsula and thinking, well, what would Brian and I have been doing? Had we grown up here, how would we have turned out? How would this have worked? And that's kind of what catalyzed a lot of it. And then I've done other walks in Japan these are all linear walks, and I started to want to play around. Like, what if I picked 10 cities that were mid-sized cities that no one's ever been to? And what if I walked 50 kilometers in each of those cities? What would that feel like? And that actually turned into this really interesting, uplifting thing. If there's like a inversion of the peninsula. So the New York Times does this thing, 52 places every year. They kind of recommend 52 places you should go to. And during that 10-city walk, I'd walk from cities in Hokkaido all the way down to Kagoshima on the bottom of Kyushu. And one of the cities I went to was Morioka. And the New York Times that year was like, hey, do you have a cool, anywhere in the world you want? Anywhere in the world. It was not Japan. They weren't like, hey, Japan guy, tell us something cool in Japan. And I was like, well, Morioka, it's such a great little city. Not that, 300,000, that's about, so it's decently sized. But it just had such good energy. And it was because I'd been walking these peninsulas in these kind of post-industrial areas that I was actually so inspired and moved by the energy of these cities, that the really beautiful, active ones I found. And I was like, amazing coffee shops, just lots of life, young people starting businesses, just had this vitality that was kind of undeniable. And yet no one in 23 years had ever recommended the city to me. And I was just, this is bananas. So I did this really impassioned pitch to the New York Times, and they don't tell you if they're going to accept it, and they don't tell you where it's going to be on the list when it comes out. And so then the list comes out, and that year number 1 was London for like all the coronation stuff, and then number 2 was Morioka. And so people freaked out. They're like, why? I don't know. I guess it'd be like picking Evanston or something. Like have it be London is the number 1 place in the world to go to, and number 2 is Evanston. You just be like, what? We like Evanston, but why number 2 in the world? And then the Japanese media found out I spoke Japanese, and that created this insane tidal wave of media reaching out to me and me being on TV and all this. And they said, oh, the mayor wants to meet you. Come up. And so, okay, I'll go up and meet the mayor. And I go up to meet the mayor, and thank God I put on a suit. I wasn't really thinking about it. It's like the first time I've worn a suit in like 10 years. I put on this suit, and I thought I was just going to go shake the guy's hand. And they opened the doors. It's like, oh, the mayor's in here. They opened the doors, and behind the doors, it looked like this, except you were all journalists. And you all had giant network TV cameras on. It was they totally bamboozled me. And the mayor is sort of sitting on a little throne in the back. And I go over and I say hello to him, and he says, oh, thank you, Modo-san, for doing this. Good luck. And then he just left. And I hadn't prepared a speech. I hadn't prepared anything. And the first question, the journalists start lining up, and they go, oh, Modo-san, how do we solve poverty? And I was like, you guys got the wrong guy. This is way above my pay grade. I do not know how to solve poverty. I just think you have great coffee. And it was very weird that no one had told me to go have coffee in your town before. And so anyway, that led to many, many more interviews. I've done like 100 newspaper and TV things and magazines and all this stuff. But what's been great about it is, and apropos of this book and all this stuff, is, everyone on TV wants to know, what's your favorite soba? What's your favorite coffee? How many bowls of this did you eat? Yada, yada. They always want to just talk about dumb food stuff. And I'm like, they're like, what's your favorite soba? I'm like, my favorite soba is National Health Insurance. I love National, it's so delicious. That's, but it's turned into this conversation because no normal Japanese person would ever think about the infrastructure that they've built socially that enables a city like Morioka to be so cool, to allow all of these individuals to open businesses, to not sacrifice anything, to not feel like, oh, I can't afford healthcare, or I can't do, I can't have a family. If I do this, I got to have this job over here at this company, yada, yada. So making none of these compromises. And so you get this beautiful patchwork of funkiness, someone running a Japanese jazz bar, or this kind of weird cafe that's focused on this specific thing. And so just talking about why that's good and trying to make Japan kind of self-aware of that stuff has been an amazing sub-conversation to come out of having done walks like this, where I see, even in the worst bits, there's still a grace that people are living by, and that's really inspiring. And it's been fun to become a weird national. I have like a monthly radio show and stuff, and I'm always like, healthcare is awesome. I'm like, who is Moto-san? Why does he like healthcare so much?
Well, that's a good gear shift to the fact that you've been in the U.S. for 6 weeks now. And
4 weeks.
4
so
weeks.
Far, yeah.
6-week tour.
Yeah.
4 weeks, so a month. And it's this month, and it's this United States, and it's 2025. And I'm curious about kind of how being back at this moment in time with everything falling apart has hit you.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, because I've been, Japan's been my home for 25 years. And there was this period, when Obama got elected, it was kind of like, oh, maybe I moved back to America. This is kind of cool, And then I did move back a little bit. I was living in Palo Alto, which was a really important period of my life, living with some really amazing people. And I think I talked about this on the Tim Ferriss podcast, but just having these amazing archetypes nearby and being able to be in a house with them and work with these people that were just super talented and just leveling up my sense of self-worth was really critical. But in the end, after a couple of years, I went back to Japan because I ultimately just felt kind of perverted by the money situation. In Silicon Valley, there's just this incredible amount of money being thrown around. And I felt all these muscles I had built up in my 20s of not compromising and not kind of sacrificing in terms of the work I wanted to produce. I felt them getting kind of whittled away by being in that environment. So anyway, that was a reason to step back. And then obviously 2016 election was complicated. Everything's complicated now. And it just feels like, especially with the walks, and what I've learned doing the walks is that, look, if you stay plugged into this thing, you're going to lose your mind. And I think more than ever, I think 15 years ago, that wasn't really the case. It felt to me 15 years ago weird. Twitter to me, the moment it launched, felt weird. It felt like something I didn't want to engage with necessarily. I remember a couple of my first tweets were very snarky, like, why am I going to use this thing? And even the way it was spelled, TWTTR, it just felt like it was like, fritzing out or something. But now there's something else that's happening. I think that is, to me, feels really corrosive. And during the 2020 election, when it was Biden and Trump, I did this thing where I walked from Tokyo to Kyoto, and I thought, I left about a week before the election, and I told all my friends, don't tell me who wins. I'm not going to be looking at the news. and everyone was, the lead up to that was just like total mania, which the lead up to everything now. I feel like every week is just like another level of mania happening. But the lead up to that one in particular was just like mega mania. And I remember just thinking, man, this is so important. And some farmer is definitely going to tell me. Like, the election's going to happen, and then some farmer's going to yell out to me, like, hey, did you hear Biden got it? That's what it felt like, with you being plugged into kind of general social media, English language social media. And the election happened, and no farmers yelled out to me. No cafe owners told me anything. No one whispered anything. It was just this weird moment of realizing that you can ensconce yourself in kind of the chaos of things, and that there has to be an active level of not disinterest or total disconnection, but that you have to engage with today. And that walk, I finally just messaged a friend and said, okay, you can tell me what's going on. And they're like, you don't want to know. It's terrible. All sorts of bad things are happening. But it just helped remind me that not everything in the world that is true or the total truth of the world is not contained on a social network, is I think the important thing I took away from that. And knowing when to look at it and to engage with it and to be concerned and change your course of action based on that is really critical, but also knowing when to step away and protect yourself and build up the energy to be able to follow through on that course of action feels equally critical. But the walks are incredible platforms and tools for learning how to do that.
Totally. We have about 8 minutes, and then we're going to go to your questions. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, you have, over the course of the last few years now, right? You've sort of built your own social network, for oversimplified.
Literally.
Right? Yeah. Well, true.
Who here is on my social network? Thank you.
Go.
Love it.
But you've built up what you call a membership program called Special Projects, right? Which has really enabled you to some degree to be able to...
Not to some degree.
Yeah.
Completely.
So I'm curious kind of what led to you starting that and
Sadness.
kind of how... Perfect.
Rejection.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
Yeah, it was like 2018. I was trying to sell some essays. I had this huge essay for The Atlantic about walking in Japan, and I spent all this time on it, and then I got ghosted by the editor. And it kind of crushed me. Again, like, if you read this and you find out where I come from, I have all sorts of anxiety about class anxiety and wealth anxiety and all sorts of stuff. And so I just always forever am in this imposter syndrome mode. And so when someone like Atlantic Editor ghosts me, that to me just triggers all of these kind of trauma complexes about, oh, okay, I'm not valuable. I don't have anything to say anyway. Oh, I was just like tricking myself into believing I should be writing this essay, yada, yada, yada. And so it was in that space. I wrote something for Wired about how digital books are terrible and that universe has kind of failed. But within the kind of contemporary digital publishing world, subscriptions have done really well. And so that, I wrote that essay and I was like, oh, maybe I should look more into subscription software and doing it on my own. And then that led to me calling all my friends who are journalists, and everyone was like, dude, you should do it. You have stuff you want to talk about. You have an audience, blah, blah, blah. Do it. And so that was really it. It was great reluctance. And also I felt like I'd used up all of my other options, because it is so hard to run a membership program and to kind of be self-initiated and self-driven, especially because you really don't get that many members at first. And it's kind of crushing, and you really have to kind of learn to derive from each person some kind of permission. And it really has to be like on a person by person basis, especially to start. And I think a lot of people underestimate just how crushing that can be, and how much you sort of have to evolve and kind of do different iterations and tests. And, you know, it wasn't until 18 months into it that I made Kisa by Kisa. And then I realized, oh, if I do, I want to give members a discount. And that was like the first real member thing I'd ever given members. And Kickstarter didn't allow you to do that. There was no coupons. And so I was like, all right, I looked at Shopify and I was like, oh, I can kind of hack Shopify to be Kickstarter. So I made a different version of Shopify's, and I called it Craigstarter. And I was able to give people coupons. And it turned out that, to use terrible startup parlance, there's an incredible product market fit between me making cool fine art books and people wanting to be members and support my work and get a discount on the book. But it just turns out people need that little something tangible. Makes, you know, it's like the tote bags for NPR or whatever. There's a reason they do that, because it really does. It's like you want to get that one little dumb thing, and it can mean the world. And so from that changed everything, and the scale of it and the numbers in terms of the business. It's an incredible business. I feel very lucky. And so this book, I retained fine art rights to it. Sort of Ryan Coogler recently made his movie Sinners. And part of what's kind of amazing about his contract with the studios is that he retained some kind of special film rights or final cut or distribution format rights.
He gets full ownership of it after 25 years. Yeah.
Okay, so he gets full ownership back, which is unheard of. And then also he was able to do 7 different formats. You know, he shot in IMAX. He had just total creative control. And so it was kind of like that for me. It's like for me, retaining that autonomy is so critical, because I'm so afraid of people throwing me away. I'm like, someone's always going to throw me away. And so having the fine art rights was sort of like an insurance policy, so that no matter what happens with this, and you really do lose a certain amount of control going with a big publisher. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and Random House has been great. This really represents kind of the peak version of what I think this book could be. So I'm very proud of it, and I'm lucky it turned out that way. But I know a lot of people it doesn't turn out that way. But at the same time, I am very glad to still have the fine art rights from a business point of view, because even if I sell 50,000 of these, I still sort of make more money just selling a few thousand fine art editions. And so keeping that, which enables me to do more work, is, to me, feels foundational. But it's been interesting. But honestly, the membership program is, I couldn't have done any of these walks. I couldn't do anything I'm doing. I couldn't do this tour without the membership program. That's what's paying for this. Random House has given me $0 for this tour. So this is entirely out of pocket. This is like a $10,000 tour, like 6 weeks on the road, Ubers, flights, hotels, all this stuff. So that's entirely membership funded.
So we're going to go to people's questions in a second, but I feel like there's a nugget here around the fact that there are sort of people spread across everywhere that are kind of raising their hand to say, hey, I want to help you, do your work. And then that work involves going out and meeting people sort of at random and just saying, hey, it's people saying to you, I care about you. And then you're going out in the world and saying to people, I care about you, right? Like there's a really interesting kind of circular humanity that's happening in all of this.
Yeah.
How much of that is purposeful and how much of that is just sort of who you are?
I mean, it's definitely not calculated. It's just kind of how it happened. But I think the impulse for me to go out to the people and try to elevate those I met along the road. I think a lot about how, obviously, I'm a white dude writing about Asia. That's like a certain thing. And in the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of expats writing about Asia. I read a lot of those books, and a lot of those books make me really uncomfortable. And so I spent a lot of time resisting writing about Japan. I didn't want to be, I'm not going to decode it for you. I'm not going to show you Japan in a way that you couldn't figure out on your own, or that the Japanese can't explain for themselves. So that was always kind of in the back of my mind. And I really didn't do any Japan writing until like 2019, yeah, right. It's God, what is time anymore? Until like 2019, 2020-ish. And it was through great reluctance. And it was only when I started doing these big walks with this mentor, John. And John, to me, modeled just such a healthy relationship with the country, where nothing, so I think a lot of these asymmetrical, toxic relationships that expats, and I consider myself an immigrant, not an expat, because there's all this sort of stuff layered on top of being an expat that I don't feel any of. But I feel like expats kind of have this weird asymmetry of looking down on the place that they're living in. And you got a lot of that in the writing in the 80s and the 90s. And so there's kind of almost an implicit racism to a lot of the writing, and an implicit sort of like, look at these fools, kind of just in the way people would write about Japan. Even like, Donald Ritchie writing about Japan in the Inland Sea. He kind of hates Japanese people, and it's this guy who dedicated his life to Japan and, uncovering, sort of revealing Kurosawa and Ozu and all this. And so anyway, very, very, with incredible reluctance, I thought about writing about Japan, and seeing John, my mentor, and this guy who has an incredible relationship with the country, seeing him engage in this totally, I don't want to say authentic, but like, he demanded nothing. And he was purely interested in elevating and learning. That's it. He's just genuinely curious about the history of where we were going, where we were walking, and the people along the road, and how they interacted with the history. And it was only after walking with John for years that I thought, oh, maybe I can do something like this with my own twist, because I have a very different background than John has. And so to be able to go at this and kind of engage with these people in a way of, for me, looking for archetypes of just how can you live your life? That was sort of the great search. Because the place I grew up in, there were a lot of anti-archetypes, anti-pattern archetypes. So, the neighbor tried to kill himself again. This friend's sister is pregnant again. It's just like, these parents don't know how to do. This guy's drunk. Yeah. So there was a lot of pain, and there was a lot of like how not to be a great parent, how not to be a great father. And so for me, I was sort of out in the world doing these walks, meeting these people along the way, just kind of looking at their lives and being like, wow, I just respect what you've built, even out here in the middle of nowhere. Even out here in what is just a very simple, not being like reductive of it, but just like, there's a beautiful thing that you've created here on this peninsula, in this place that's depopulating, but you still got a certain amount of grace, and you still respect what you're doing and how you're doing it. And for me, that was just powerful to see. And so my impulse was not to, and again, with the language in here too, my translation of it is, I have a connection with North Carolina, Western North Carolina. I have this strange connection down there. And so all the translation of the people on the peninsula, I hear in my ear as sort of Blue Ridge Mountain people, kind of like just outside Appalachia, sort of educated, but with all the interesting Southern inflections that you can find in kind of North Carolina, South Carolina. And so my translation of this is, I've not seen anyone translate Japanese people like this, because it's always sort of Tokyo Japanese, no matter where you are. Or there's this over-leaning on, I'm gonna make sure you know that these people are other. And so I'm gonna inject all these weird Japanese words. Like, he went to the ofuro bath to have a beer. It's like, just use the language. And so when I meet these folks, I really try to just meet them as they are and see them as they are. There's no like, look at this weirdness or that weirdness. It's like, look at what's this amazing life that's been created out along this path in the middle of kind of nowhere in some cases. And I'm just inspired by that, in the same way I was inspired by Morioka, which, people living in Morioka just think, this is just a normal little city. To me, it was just a freaking bastion of archetypes, of cool ways to live, and the way you can have an alternative to Tokyo or Osaka or Nagoya, and you can build a creative, beautiful life there. That's really what turned me on. And that's ultimately what made me feel like I want to share these findings and hopefully do it in a way that everyone who's represented in here feels honored and loved. And in the same way, I hope Brian, is honored by the way I write about him and kind of shape the book towards him.
That is wonderful. When we were sitting in the very small room in the back, Molly was like, all right, you've got 6:05, 6:45. We need to move to questions. They're running a tight ship here, and I'm very happy to report that it's exactly 6:45. So we're going to move to, we nailed that. We did a good job. Going to move to questions. And who's got some for Craig? I see hat in the back.
Hey, Craig. So I've read you wax poetic about JavaScript.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about how important coding is.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And so I'm wondering, in terms of things becoming other things, tech maybe being so like creatively empowering and that kind of thing, and now becoming something that you have to kind of unplug from out of self-preservation. Sort of how you've experienced that transition.
Yeah, so the question was, tech goes from empowerment to sort of hindrance, right? I mean, obviously it's very specific pieces of tech, right? And it's more the capitalist infrastructure on top of it, right? The stuff that's really toxic is the dopaminergic kind of loopy things, right? So it's like Candy Crush or whatever. There's like something happening in there that's terrible. It's very toxic and kind of gets you sucked in. Or Clash of Clans, as I've written about. I got addicted to Clash of Clans. I was in Myanmar doing research, and they'd just gotten cell phones for the first time, and all the farmers were on their buffaloes playing Clash of Clans. And I thought I should play this and be on a team with the farmers. And then next thing I know, I'm spending like $100 a day, like trying to buy gems or whatever it was to try to like just beat it. I was like, I just have to get to the end. So it's this weird layer that we've put on top of it. I remember as a teenager with dial-up modems and stuff like that, you download a pirated BBS game or something. I'm downloading King's Quest 4 or whatever. And it's like, it takes like 4 hours or 3 hours, and you couldn't do anything else on the computer because it didn't multitask. So you could do computer stuff, and then you'd have these natural breaks where you go play basketball or go skateboard. So it's kind of built into it. And now, one of the things I started doing, I started smoking 2 years ago. I decided to take that up, and it freaks Americans out so much. If I said that in France, they'd be like, why did you take so long? Americans, I love Americans. You guys hate smoking so much. But if I said I smoked weed, you'd love it. It's so weird. It's so weird right now. But I started smoking 2 years ago, kind of on a lark. I was doing this jazz tour, all these jazz cafes all around Japan. And it's all these old guys who smoke. And I realized I need to ingratiate myself as quickly as possible. So if I just go in, sit at the counter and be like, hey, can I have an ashtray? They'd be like, oh, he's one of us. And it worked, and it was great. So I'd become very friendly with these old guys very quickly. I'd, chat, get them crying. I was like a therapist for these guys. And then I realized, wow, nicotine's really great. Nicotine feels amazing. And if you just have one cigarette a day, which is what I do, I allow myself one cigarette a day, you get 100% of the benefit. And I feel like almost none of the negative. But I'm going with none of the negative. And you get this 7-minute beautiful break in the day. And part of my rule for that is obviously I can't have my smartphone in front of me. But what happens is because, in Japan especially, smoking is it's like almost like pedophilia. It's like, it's like so, you can do it in this one, like you can't do pedophilia anywhere, but you know what I'm saying. It's very, it's very, I just mean in the sense like it's so strict about where you can smoke. Okay, pedophilia you can't do anywhere. But except in Japan, who knows? I'm sure there's somewhere you can do it. Anyway, let's move on from that. This is being recorded. We'll cut that out of the podcast. But because of that, I have to go to these like smoking areas sometimes, and I'll go and have a cigarette in a smoking area, and I just observe all the other smokers, and it is so depressing. It's just somewhat. First of all, vaping is way more depressing than normal smoking. That's like another tier of like weirdness. And so someone just vaping with TikTok, going like this, to me, it just feels like it's Vegas. We've just given up. It's like some weird, like cosmic teat. We just got our lips on, and we're just sucking all this dopamine out of. It's just so bizarre. So it really is how you use it. And so for me, with all these dumb rules, I've had to do that because I know like from experience, like I just can't resist otherwise. And my other big rule, and the thing I tell everyone to try to do that kind of gets you started down maybe a less connected road, is just turn the internet off when you go to bed and put your phone, don't put your phone in the bedroom. There's lots of alarm clocks out there, lots and lots of great Braun alarm clocks that are cool, they look great and they work fine, they wake you up in the morning. A lot of people are like, I need my phone for the alarm. You can put it somewhere else, you can get an alarm clock. Put your phone not even in view of where you're gonna be when you wake up. And have it in a box, have it in a drawer charging, and don't touch the internet until after lunch. And just try to do that a couple days a week. And I find those mornings they blossom with creativity and kind of an openness and a weird anxiety. There's almost like an apnea that, like, this kind of like almost like palpitations, and you kind of get rid of that. And we're so ensconced in it, you forget what it feels like to not be in that. So I'm still generally tech positive about a lot of things, even LLM stuff, obviously, I'm using it for the membership program and whatnot. But you have to just be hyper vigilant because it's out to get you, sort of.
Who has another question? Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here, for writing this book, first off. The question I have is related to something that you said about being so worn out at your end of your day,
Yeah.
with the walking and the thinking and the writing and stuff. So the question is, do you dream in those states? And when even if you don't, when you dream normally, do you dream in Japanese or in English or both?
Yeah, I definitely dream. I can't remember any specific dreams, but yeah, I dream on those trips for sure. But I have to say the anxiety is much lower. Even 2 weeks ago, I had a dream about talking to my grad professor, and I had to explain something, and I'd forgotten everything I learned about the subject, and woke up in a cold sweat. So still like these insane anxiety dreams that you can have. I don't get any of that because it is so, you just use yourself up so much. And I think, exercise helps reduce that as well. But sure, I dream. And I dream, I'd say like 70% English, 30% Japanese. That's about what the breakdown is. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you know about Japan that made you want to go there in the first place?
Really not much. Just Nintendo came from Japan. That was sort of it. That was really it. And Nintendo was sort of this island, this bastion of safety, in this town I grew up in that wasn't particularly together. Nintendo was kind of an oasis. And I just remember seeing, made in Japan. Ooh. It was, sort of first conscious awareness of another place. And then my family saved. And then when I was like 13, 14, I grew up with my grandparents and my mom. And when I was 13, 14, finally we were able to do a package tour to Waikiki. And Waikiki in '93 was like going to Tokyo. I mean, it was just owned. It was like 90% Japanese. Japanese owned everything. Hawaiians to this day still hate Japanese people because of sort of the amount of economic sort of pressure they brought to the islands, I think, in the early 90s. So it's very bizarre. We go see Don Ho. My grandmother loved Don Ho, like crazily loved Don Ho. And so we always go to the Don Ho show, and he would just have these bizarre racist jokes about Japan. He was just kind of in shock. But it's, I'm 13, I don't know what's going on. But I golfed. In America, one of the weird things, no healthcare, but like you can golf for like $2 or $3 on a public course. And so my dad we'd go find balls or steal balls, I guess, from golf courses. And then we'd go to the public course and golf. And so I could golf, and I was pretty good at golfing. And we're in Hawaii, and I was like, I want to go golfing. And I went to the golf course, which was much nicer than anyone I'd been to before. And I was 14, let's say I was 14. And he wouldn't let you play alone. And so they teamed me up with 2 Japanese businessmen. And they were maybe in their 40s or so. I have no idea how old they were. And they were just really sweet and strange. And we got to spend this entire 18 holes of golf together. And they were like, "Are you married?" I'm like, "I'm 14. Like, what's with these questions?" And one guy had a hat on that had WHOOF, and then underneath it said ARTED. And if you read it fast, it says "Who farted?" And I was like, "Do you know what that means?" And he's like, "No, what does it mean?" And I was like, "Who are these people?" And they were so gentle and and empathetic and kind with me. And I made them tell me how to say hello in Japanese, and they taught me, it was like, how to introduce yourself. And the thing they taught me was hajimemashite dozo yoroshiku onegai itashimasu, which is like the longest possible way you could possibly say hello to anyone. So that was also bizarre. And I remember writing it down and bringing it to school and thinking, I was like, hey guys, do I know how to say hello in Japanese? You said hajimemashite dozo yoroshiku onegai itashimasu. And so I think it was these things, and seeing my tour guide, our tour guide person in Hawaii, speak in Japanese fluently to people. It was all very inspiring. And I think it was the first time I had ever seen truly non-immigrant people who had not integrated in any way with America. So it was true. I mean, there was no attempt, Japanese people visiting Waikiki, to pretend to even know English. Everything was set up for Japan. Everything's in Japanese. And so that was exciting to see that. And I think when I was 19, and I was thinking about places to go, Europe kind of felt easy. I go to Europe, I'm going to kind of, I go to England, I can be a British person. I go to Spain, I can be a Spanish person. And so to go to a place where all these things that I kind of loved as a kid, talk about soft power, right? This is the power of like doing pop culture and stuff, is you kind of implant, you kind of like incept these ideas in kids' minds. I just thought it would be fun to go for the challenge. Let's go to Tokyo. Also, it was really cheap. Like looking at university, it was like $5,000 for the year with a homestay, and you could get scholarships. And it was like, wow, this is free. Why not go do this? And I applied on a whim and got in. And so let's go. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. There you go.
Forgive me, I'm incredibly nervous.
Oh.
So I was an Explorers Club member, like when you launched.
Nice.
Like, month one. I was like,
That was the original name of the membership
I'm
program.
here. And like this moment is like great to have this. So I'm solo backpacker, Gen X, landscape photographer, all the things.
Awesome.
And
What's your name?
David.
David.
David Sweeney. Yeah. I'm also an adoptee.
Oh, nice.
And like when you like kind of came out like talking about that like a year ago, yeah, I see you. I see this.
Yeah.
And so I think like contained like in like the arc of your work, like what I see is like this self-actualizing adoptee.
Right.
And like I had a son 4 years ago. Most adoptees don't have kids.
Right.
And like so I'm like experiencing this genetic mirroring
Yeah.
of my son right now. And I know that's what you're going through right now too.
Yeah.
And have you felt like that activating a part of your like mind and brain that hasn't been touched before? If there's anything that you'd like to share,
Yeah.
like about that, I'd love to hear that, because there's a language that you're using and themes in your work
Yeah.
that like, yeah, I see you.
Oh.
I see what you're doing.
Thanks, David.
And I'm so incredibly happy for you in this moment and what you're going through right now, because the struggle is real.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't engage really with any adoptee
Yeah.
anything. And I think part of it is, as an adoptee, you carry this weird guilt that you don't want to offend your adoptive parents by searching or looking or thinking, even glancing in that direction. And so you kind of suppress it. And, I did this adoption podcast a month ago, and talking with Haley, who's interviewed like 400 adoptees, and very interesting, wonderful things she's doing. And talking with her, and really being the first time I ever engaged with the adoptee world,
Yeah.
was pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And just getting the stats from her, even hearing this, I'm not surprised. Most adoptees don't have kids.
Yeah.
Adoptees are 4 times more likely to do self-harm, have addiction problems, things like that. So there's definitely something embedded in that world that I'd never touched. And part to your question about like why Japan, why did I stay there? A big part of it was walking through Tokyo, passing tens of thousands of people a day through like Shinjuku Station or whatever, and not feeling the struggle that I felt back home, and feeling like everyone could only fall this far. There was like this implicit net underneath us all. That was one of the most moving things I ever felt. And so to be kind of ensconced in that kind of protective layer, that protective place, was really important to me, because as an adoptee, you're kind of constantly battling with, everyone's gonna throw me away. That's a huge, like, fundamental feeling. It's like, so when I got ghosted by that editor, it was like dark times.
Did you know Steve Jobs was also an adoptee?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should tell that story. Read Isaacson's biography.
Yeah.
In that lens, and boy, you really get it.
Yeah, it turns out, there's a lot of tormented adoptees who are insanely driven. Yeah. So a big part of it has been to transmute those feelings into something positive. And for most of my 20s, I didn't know how to. And so I drank myself into the ground. You know, it was just like alcohol. I get why propensity towards addiction is so high in the community, because it's so hard. And then your kind of adoptive parents aren't really schooled in a way to help you. And no one is really trained to be as present, because it takes so much work to, I think, bring an adoptee to a healthy place. And almost no parents are capable of doing that. And then especially when you compound it with, you know, my parents got divorced when I was 2 and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. You're just constantly in this mode of, how do I protect myself? How do I protect myself? And so Tokyo also felt like, because I'm not Japanese, and I'll never be Japanese, and I can not be thrown away by a place that never accepts me in the first place. And so that was very comforting. And so in my 20s, that kept me there. That really kept me there. And it just turned out, too, that Tokyo was a wonderful place to build a creative life, because cost of living was so low. So my rent was never more than $600 a month, and I was able to live in the center of the city. And so that's been really exciting. And then the last couple of years, I've had some interesting experiences where I've met family members, birth family members for the first time. And so like in Seattle, for example, my sister flew down and came to the talk. That was the first time we met at the event. And she had 6 months ago said, I don't want to connect. And then 3 months ago said, oh, I kind of thought about it. And she's 28 and lives in Alaska, and she's married. And we did one video call, and it was both just like, we were both just like, whoa. Like she's an only child, I'm an only child. It's like, wow, we really like each other. And immediately she messaged me after, she said, hey bro, can I call you bro? And so she came down, and then the next day we went for a walk in the pouring rain in Seattle. And it was sweet, you know, and you kind of see this optimism in her, this kind of like, you know, like, we're going to do this. It's pouring, it's disgusting, it's freezing. And she's like, let's keep going, let's go to the top. Even her husband, who's in the National Guard, was like, hey, I think we should turn back. And then in New York, my aunt and uncle came, who I'd never met before. And they messaged me, and they're like, hey, we want to take you out to lunch before the event. Can we take you to Benihana? So it's just been very bizarre to suddenly go from zero family, my adopted family so small, to now suddenly, you know, my birth mom has like 4 siblings, and there's all these aunts and uncles and all these cousins. I'm getting Instagram DMs from people in like Wisconsin who are like, hey, I found out you're my cousin. Like, I'm 33, I run a flower shop, you know, like I've got 1 kid. I'm like, this is so weird. So it's, as Haley says in the podcast, she's kind of off air just saying like, I'm pretty lucky, because not all, you know, family kind of connections go in positive directions. And even she connected with her birth mom, and then 3 months later, her birth mom was like, I don't want to talk anymore. So, you know, it's like on both sides of the table, people are carrying so much pain and trauma. So, I'm lucky in that I was 43 when I like entered into this bizarre sort of new phase of life. And a lot of the stories I told myself about my origin are being rewritten in real time, and about who my people are and things like that. And feeling, I think if I was in my 20s, I would want more out of it. And I'm really, really lucky in that I have a stepdaughter who I've had this incredible experience growing together with. She's 15 now. We just did like a 90-minute video call last night. I had to turn the video call off, which I feel like is like a very rare position for a parent and a 15-year-old. And she was like going through her whole photos gallery and showing me every photo she had taken and telling me every story. I was like, okay, great. I'm glad we have a good relationship. But like in going through things with her and growing, and then through the membership program and feeling the support of you all, especially, you know, early members and stuff like this, I think has brought me to a place of peace in a way, something I didn't have 20 years ago. And I could not have engaged with this in the way I'm engaging with it now. And I don't need anything from it. So when my sister was like, hey, I can't connect. Great, I totally get it. That's cool. Yeah, I'm here if you need me, that's fine. And being able to say that without any ego or there's no ego involved at all in it, it felt really good. And to be able to meet these people and to think in a non-narcissistic way, boy, I'm really glad they get to meet me as I am today.
They're part of your story.
Yeah, but being able to feel that was a really profound moment. And it's weird, you don't think things like that unless these weird catalysts kind of come up. So, yeah, pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah. Thanks,
All
Sam.
right. I see Molly standing over there. I got you. I've got
You
you,
got it?
Molly.
Gotta sign things.
That brings us to the end of this conversational part. Craig, thank you so
Thank you,
much
Dan.
for taking part. Thanks all of you for